What is happening between Washington and Ottawa right now doesn't look like a negotiation. It doesn't even look like a disagreement. It looks like a demolition. For 3 decades, the USMCA and its predecessor NAFTA were the backbone of North American commerce. $1.6 trillion in annual trade, the largest, most integrated economic partnership on the face of the earth. It was stable, it was predictable, it was the foundation, but as of this morning, that foundation is cracking. Donald Trump tried to squeeze Canada. He thought he was dealing with the old Ottawa, the friendly neighbor that nods along, the junior partner that folds when Washington snaps its fingers. He miscalculated. Mark Carney didn't flinch. He didn't send a quiet envoy. He didn't offer a backroom concession to make the noise go away. Instead, he did something that no Canadian prime minister has done in the modern era. He looked at a $1.6 trillion trade relationship and said, we'd rather let it collapse than be dictated to. And the shockwave from that single statement is already ripping through supply chains, through stock tickers, and almost certainly through the retirement accounts sitting in your brokerage right now. Trump is livid. The West Wing is in damage control, and the business press is chasing the wrong headline. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how the USMCA framework started falling apart, who blinked and who didn't, and why the $1.6 trillion architecture you've taken for granted your entire adult life is now officially on life support. So let's cut through the spin. Here is exactly what unfolded in the last 72 hours. It started, as it always does, with an ultimatum. President Trump, furious that the scheduled USMCA 5-year review wasn't producing the concessions he wanted, decided to blow up the table. He went on Truth Social before sunrise and issued a demand that read more like a ransom note. He ordered Canada to eliminate its cultural content protections for American streaming platforms, fully open its telecommunications sector to U.S. ownership, and surrender all remaining dairy and poultry supply management quotas. If Ottawa didn't capitulate within 48 hours, Trump declared the USMCA effectively dead and promised immediate imposition of a 25% across-the-board tariff on every single Canadian product entering the United States. Now, normally this is the part where Ottawa panics. They assemble a crisis team. They send the trade minister on a red eye to Washington with talking points and a forced smile. They try to find the off-ramp. That is not what happened. Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney convened an emergency press conference on Parliament Hill. He didn't look shaken. He didn't look defensive. He looked like a central banker who had just read the stress test results and already knew where every vulnerability was. He faced the cameras and said, without a trace of emotion, the USMCA is a partnership, not a protection racket. And Canada will not renegotiate at gunpoint. He didn't float a compromise. He didn't request an extension. He rejected the entire premise of Trump's demand, and then he escalated. He announced that if Washington proceeds with blanket tariffs, Canada will invoke retaliatory provisions targeting American agricultural exports, restrict rare earth mineral shipments critical to U.S. defense contractors, and begin formal acceleration of trade diversification agreements with the European Union and the Indo-Pacific bloc. Social media detonated. Trump unleashed a barrage of posts calling Carney a failed banker and a puppet of Davos elites. But while the president was rage posting, something remarkable happened on the trading floor. The Canadian dollar held firm. U.S. agricultural futures cratered. For the first time in modern history, a U.S. president threatened to tear up the entire framework, and the smaller country didn't scramble for cover. They loaded their own weapon. You need to understand how unprecedented this is. This isn't a tariff skirmish over lumber. This is the potential unraveling of a $1.6 trillion integrated economy. Trump is accustomed to dominance. He's accustomed to dictating terms. But this week, he discovered that dominance only works when the other party believes they have more to lose. And Mark Carney has done the math. I know that sounds like rhetoric, but I want to walk you through the actual numbers. Because when you see the exposed wiring behind this relationship, you realize this isn't about ideology. It's about arithmetic. And the arithmetic is turning on Washington. Let's look at receipt number 1. The manufacturing meltdown. Within an hour of Trump's announcement, GM, Ford, and Stellantis shares all dropped sharply. Why? Because the North American auto sector isn't a collection of national industries. It is one single cross-border organism. A single engine block might be cast in Ontario, machined in Michigan, assembled with a wiring harness from Chihuahua, shipped back to Ontario for testing, then returned to a plant in Kentucky for final assembly. You slap a 25% tariff on that process, and you aren't punishing Canada. You are punishing Dearborn. You are punishing Toledo. Procurement directors were on emergency calls within minutes, scrambling to calculate the cost impact per vehicle if the border suddenly becomes a toll booth. They understand what the White House apparently doesn't. You cannot build a North American vehicle without Canadian aluminum, Canadian steel, and Canadian parts. It is physically impossible. Receipt number 2, the energy stranglehold. This is the dimension that American media almost never covers. They treat Canada like it's a quaint country that exports hockey players and politeness. Canada is the single largest foreign supplier of energy to the United States, not a major supplier. The largest, 60% of U.S. crude oil imports flow south from Alberta. The pipelines feeding the Midwest and the Gulf Coast are Canadian infrastructure carrying Canadian product. Beyond oil, Canada supplies uranium for American nuclear plants, potash for agriculture, and rare earth minerals the Pentagon needs for advanced weapon systems. When Carney referenced retaliatory measures, he wasn't talking about slapping a tax on bourbon. He was talking about constricting the heavy crude that American refineries are specifically engineered to process. If Canada reduces that flow even modestly, gas prices in the United States don't inch up, they explode. The mere suggestion of this sent energy futures spiking in afternoon trading. That is the market telling you that Carney holds a card Trump cannot block. Receipt number 3, the international chess move. Trump loves to attack Carney as a globalist. And yes, Carney is a product of the international financial establishment. He governed the Bank of England. He chaired the Financial Stability Board. He has the phone numbers of every central banker and finance minister on the planet. But here is why that network is a weapon right now. While Trump was posting threats, sources say Carney was working the phones not to Washington, but to Brussels, to London, to Canberra, to Tokyo. He is building a coalition. Multiple sources report a joint communique is being drafted between Canada and the European Union, reaffirming the rules-based trading order and condemning unilateral tariff threats against allied nations. Do you see what's happening? Trump is playing whack-a-mole, trying to intimidate one country at a time. Carney is constructing a web. He's assembling the industrialized world into a unified front that frames the United States as the rogue actor. He's leveraging his credibility to reassure investors while positioning Trump as the source of global volatility. And the scoreboard confirms it's working. The Dow shed 500 points in a single session. The Toronto Stock Exchange barely moved. That is the scoreboard that matters most. Capital is flowing towards stability and away from chaos. So why is this happening? Why is the most powerful nation on earth struggling to bully a country with 1/9 its population? Because Trump has walked into a trap of his own construction and his playbook has been read. We've seen this strategy before. In 2018, the steel tariffs were a shock. In 2025, the shock value is gone. Trump's entire approach depends on fear and surprise. He hits hard, he hits first, and he expects collapse before the costs hit home. He needs the quick knockout to parade on cable news. But what happens when the target absorbs the punch and throws one back? He has no second move. When Carney said no, he neutralized Trump's momentum entirely, and now the president is forced to actually follow through. He has to impose the tariffs. And here is the catastrophic irony. If he imposes the tariffs, American consumers pay first. Cars become more expensive overnight. Gasoline spikes, auto parts dry up. Factories in Michigan and Ohio start issuing furlough notices. The blue-collar workers Trump built his entire political identity around protecting are the exact workers who get crushed when the supply chain seizes up. He knows this. His own economic team knows this. Leaked reports from inside the West Wing describe a civil war between the trade hawks and the economic realists. The economists are screaming that collapsing the USMCA will trigger a recession in manufacturing states before the next election. But Trump is boxed in. His pride won't let him retreat. He issued the ultimatum on camera. If he backs down now, he looks like he got outplayed by a Canadian economist. So he generates more spectacle. He attacks Carney's character. He threatens to reclassify Canada as a security threat. He floats suspending NORAD cooperation. It's theater. It's the frantic performance of a leader who pulled a lever and realized it wasn't connected to anything. He is escalating because retreat is more terrifying than collision. You're watching someone who treats international trade like a hostile takeover. In corporate mergers, you can destroy the other company. In geopolitics, the other country still exists the next morning. Canada isn't a subsidiary. The border isn't a balance sheet. Trump is fighting gravity, and gravity always wins. Look at the response from American industry. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce didn't rally behind the president. They warned of devastating and irreversible damage to North American competitiveness. Look at the Republican senators from border states. Dead silent, they know their economies are woven into Canada at the molecular level. Trump is standing on an island he built himself, and the water is rising. Now let's talk about Mark Carney, because if you only know him from headlines, you might dismiss him as just another technocrat in a Navy suit. You might assume he's just another center-left placeholder. You would be dangerously wrong. Mark Carney is not a conventional politician. He is a crisis architect. He navigated the Bank of England through Brexit. He knows what it looks like when the spreadsheets turn red. He knows how to find the exit when every door looks closed. When Trump rages, Carney calculates. Watch his body language in that press conference. No dramatic gestures, no raised voice. A dark suit, measured cadence, sentences built around data points, not slogans. He is deliberately casting himself as the rational actor in a room full of fire. And on the global stage, that persona is currency right now. The world is exhausted by disruption. Europe is drained. Asian markets are skittish. Investors are desperate for a signal that someone somewhere is still governing with a spreadsheet instead of a megaphone. Carney is selling that signal. He is telling the world, Canada is the reliable partner. We honor agreements. We follow process. We are the adults. By doing this, he transforms every Trump outburst into a Canadian recruiting tool. Every time Trump threatens to blow up a deal, Carney looks like the guardian of order. Every time Trump disrupts a supply chain, Carney positions Canada as the safe harbor for rational capital. This is textbook asymmetric strategy. Canada cannot overpower the United States in a direct confrontation. The economy is 10 times larger. The military dwarfs anything Ottawa could field. But Carney understands he doesn't need to win a war. He needs to make the war too expensive for Trump to sustain. He is targeting the exact pressure points, the specific industries, the specific congressional districts, the specific voter demographics that Trump cannot afford to lose. He's not swinging a sledgehammer. He's threading a needle. And here is the dimension Carney grasps better than anyone: the clock. Trump operates on a political stopwatch. He needs victories measured in news cycles. Carney is playing a completely different timeline. He understands that if he simply holds position, internal pressure inside the United States will compound daily until the cost of fighting exceeds the cost of conceding. It is a war of attrition disguised as a staring contest. One driver is screaming and swerving across lanes. The other has locked the wheel and is calmly checking the fuel gauge. Which one runs out of road first? So why should you care? Maybe you're watching this from Pennsylvania or Texas or the UK. Maybe you think this is just two leaders posturing. You are wrong. This touches the price of everything in your shopping cart. The North American economy isn't three separate machines. It is one machine with 30 years of integration welded into every joint. If Carney and Trump shatter that machine, every gear seizes. Planning to buy a vehicle this year? Add $4,000 to $5,000 to the sticker price. Buying food? Watch fertilizer and transport costs ripple through every aisle. Your cereal, your dairy, your produce all climb. Work in manufacturing, prepare for hiring freezes. But beyond the economics, something deeper is breaking here. We are watching the collapse of the assumption that held the Western world together for 3 generations. For 70 years, when the American president set the terms, allied nations complied. That assumption died this week. Canada, the most loyal ally, the quietest partner, just said no, publicly, firmly, and with economic weapons loaded. And if Canada can say no, who's next? Does the EU start saying no? Does Japan? Does Australia? We are watching American economic hegemony erode in real time. And it wasn't caused by Beijing or Moscow. It was triggered by Washington deciding to treat its closest allies as adversaries. Carney isn't just defending trade quotas. He is defending the principle that sovereign nations cannot be bullied into submission by their largest trading partner. He is drawing a line that says you can be our ally or you can be our adversary, but you do not get to be both. So where does this end? This is the part that should unsettle you, because normally in these confrontations, there is a quiet phone call. Both sides agree to a face-saving formula and release a joint statement full of diplomatic nothing. But Trump doesn't do quiet after being publicly defied, and Carney cannot reverse after staking Canada's sovereignty on this stand. 3 possible outcomes. Scenario A, the deep freeze. Trump imposes the tariffs. Canada retaliates surgically. Prices rise on both sides. Both leaders dig in for a prolonged trade war measured in quarters, not weeks. Markets drag, growth stalls, consumer confidence erodes. Eventually, the pain forces Congress or corporate America to broker a ceasefire. Ugly but recoverable. Scenario B, the detonation. Trump escalates beyond tariffs. He formally withdraws from the USMCA entirely. He invokes emergency powers to restrict Canadian energy. This is the doomsday scenario. Immediate industrial recession across the Great Lakes, supply chains that took 30 years to build severed in 30 days. It sounds unthinkable, but with this administration, unthinkable has become a planning assumption. Scenario C, the great pivot. Carney outmaneuvers Trump strategically. Canada accelerates emergency trade agreements with Europe and the Asia Pacific. They redirect energy exports to global markets. They structurally diversify away from the United States. This wounds Canada in the near term, but over a decade, it permanently breaks America's monopoly on Canadian commerce. It means the United States loses its most integrated trading partner, not temporarily. Forever, my read is that we are sitting in scenario A with the gravitational pull of scenario B growing stronger every day. This is where responsible leaders find the exit ramp, but Trump doesn't look for exits, and Carney has welded his door shut. We are in uncharted waters. Carney just demonstrated that a middle power can stand up to a superpower if it has the leverage and the nerve. But standing up has consequences, and every one of us is about to absorb the cost. The question isn't whether this will be painful. The question is who folds first. Do you think Carney is safeguarding Canada's sovereignty, or is he gambling with a $1.6 trillion relationship neither side can afford to lose? I want your honest take. Is this the death certificate of the USMCA, or the shock that finally forces Washington to treat its allies like allies? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to know what happens tomorrow, make sure you're subscribed. History is accelerating. Don't blink.